Let's talk Syracuse and Cal.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are talking all things Cal Golden Bears football. And you know why we're talking all things Cal Golden Bears football? Because that's Syracuse football's next opponent. That's right, this Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern, Syracuse travels to Cal. Later on in the podcast, I'm going to give you guys my official Syracuse versus Cal prediction. I'm also going to talk about Cal's defense, Cal's offense. We're going to start the podcast giving you guys a brief overview on how Cal's season has gone so far. But before we get to all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Syracuse football travels to the Cal Golden Bears this Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Cal is 5-4 overall. They are 1-4 in the ACC this season. They actually picked up their first win since joining the conference this year. Last week against Wake Forest, 46-36 down in Wake Forest. Do not be fooled by Cal's record. I know they're 5-4, which that suggests they're kind of mediocre. 1-4 in the conference is not very good, to say the least. But don't be fooled. Here is why. Cal blew a late lead against Miami. In fact, it was a big lead. They led by over 20 points in the fourth quarter earlier this season against Miami before the Hurricanes stormed back in that one. Many people think that, you know what, the refs actually screwed Cal in that game. That's neither here nor there, but the point being is that Cal held a 20-plus point lead against Miami in the fourth quarter at home. That was a game that they should have won. They lost, but hey, they're a pretty good team, right? They also hung tough at Pitt earlier this season, and they also blew a lead against NC State this season. Cal is one of those teams that, despite their record, they can pretty much hang with anyone in the country. They can also lose to anyone in the country, as evident by the fact that they actually lost to Florida State this season. Pause for laughter. So that's a brief overview of the Cal Golden Bears. They are 5-4 overall, 1-4 in ACC play. They can beat anyone. They can also lose to anyone. Hence why they are 5-4. Here is their offense, okay? Cal's offense in general is mediocre in the ACC. They average just under 400 total yards per game. That's 11th in the conference. Cal also averages about 29 points per game. You might think that's pretty high, but that's actually only 9th in the ACC. And they are led by their redshirt sophomore quarterback, Fernando Mendoza. Let's talk about Fernando Mendoza, his strengths and his weaknesses. Mendoza is a unique quarterback to what Syracuse has faced this season. And the reason why I say that he's unique is because he's mostly a pocket passer. This is not someone I would expect is going to get a lot of design run plays called for him. Think about who Syracuse has faced this season, okay? Just off the top of my head, not off the top of my head, I actually have it written down, some of the quarterbacks they faced. A lot of mobile guys. Haynes King over at Georgia Tech, Ashton Daniels for Stanford, Nohl Williams, UNLV, Thomas Castellanos, although he didn't play well and didn't run very much against Syracuse last week for Boston College. Even some dual threat guys like Eli Holstein over at Pitt. It's not to say that Mendoza, who's actually a very big dude, 6'5", 225, that he can't run, but he's certainly not as mobile as some of the other quarterbacks that Syracuse has faced this season. So he's not the most mobile guy in the world. What does Mendoza do well? I'll give you the answer. He is deadly accurate. He is completing 69% of his passes this season. That is second in the ACC, only behind Haynes King over at Georgia Tech. He also does not really put the ball in harm's way. He really doesn't. He did have a bad interception last week against Wake Forest where he just didn't see the linebacker over the middle of the field. But that's about it for Fernando Mendoza. That's a rarity for him. Mendoza has 4 interceptions this season in well over 300 pass attempts. He's got an interception rate at 1.3%. Now, you guys might not understand the context behind that, so I'll give it to you, right? An interception rate of 1.3%. That's about 1 in every 100 pass attempts get picked off by Mendoza. That's top 15 in the nation. So Mendoza is someone who really doesn't put the ball in harm's way. If you get an interception on him, keep the ball because it does not happen very often. Again, it's about 1 in 100. So in summary, Fernando Mendoza is a big kid. He's very accurate, but he's not the most mobile quarterback in the world. That's a fair assessment, I think, on Fernando Mendoza. He has certainly improved this season compared to last season. So where is Cal weak, per se? What is their main weakness on offense? Well, it's got to be their offensive line. Here's a brief overview of their offensive line, okay? As a team, Cal allows over 3 sacks per game this season. That is bottom 10 in the country. Ouch. So Mendoza gets sacked a lot. For more context for you guys on that one, Syracuse football, I think can all agree, doesn't have the greatest offensive line in the world. They give up about a sack less per game than Cal. Not very good, right? And I don't think anyone else would consider the Syracuse offensive line great. It might as well be the Great Wall of Dallas compared to Cal. Cal has also given up at least 3 sacks in every ACC game they have played, except for the Miami game. Think about that for a second. They've played 5 conference games this year, and only one of them they've allowed less than 3 sacks. I mean, they allowed like 7 against Florida State. They allowed 6 against Pitt. Even in that Miami game, they still allowed 2 sacks. So it was just under 3. It was at 2. It's for a variety of reasons. We have to be fair, okay? Number one, they're not a great running team. And this is probably the biggest surprise of Cal's season so far, is that their ineffectiveness in being able to run the football. Running back Jaydn Ott has been dealing with injuries this season, but even when he's on the field, he hasn't exactly been effective. Last season, Jaydn Ott led the formal Pac-12 with over 1,300 rushing yards, I should say. Not 1,300 last year. He had over 1,300 yards in 12 games. That's over 100 per game last season. He was preseason all ACC. He was considered to be one of the best running backs in the conference heading into this year. He was actually Cal's lone representative on the all-conference team heading into this season. But this season, it has not been very good for Jaydn Ott. He's played 6 games. Again, he's dealing with injuries, but even in those 6 games, he's got less than 200 yards rushing. That's not very good. And 2.4 yards per carry. Not very good. That is actually really, really bad. 2.4 yards per carry. Under 4 is considered not a good total. 2.4? Oh boy. If you can't run the football, what this does is it allows the defense to pin their ears back and rush the passer. So that's one reason why the offensive line is struggling. So they can't really run the ball well. Number 2, Fernando Mendoza, as I mentioned off the top, is not the most mobile quarterback in the world. When you have a mobile quarterback, they can escape would-be sacks because they can use their mobility. Now, sometimes they'll run into sacks, but more often than not, they escape those sacks. With Mendoza, who's more of a pocket passer, it allows the defense to collapse on him in the pocket. So that's another reason why the line is struggling. And number 3, their offensive line, even according to their coaches, just isn't playing well. It's not. That's what the coaches have actually said about them of Cal. Just a few weeks ago, offensive coordinator Mike Bloch literally called them out for that. Literally called out their pass protection. So Cal's offensive line is not exactly a strong suit for them, and that's putting it lightly. But they do have a very dynamic quarterback. And if you're Syracuse, you got to hope that their running back in Jaydn Ott does not get going finally this season. Just delay it one more week, okay? Jaydn Ott, you can play like an all-conference back next week when you guys play. I don't know if they have a bye week next week or not, but Jaydn Ott, not this week. Just wait one more week to have your breakout. Sound good? Is that fair to everyone? So that is a team overview of Cal. That is Cal's offense in a nutshell. Now, coming up, we'll talk about Cal's defense, which I think is the better of the two units. We'll talk about the standouts of Cal's defense and also give you a brief overview of that. Hopefully, Syracuse can be able to exploit it, but as I'm going to tell you on the next segment, it's not going to be easy. Basketball season has arrived, and whether it's the NBA or college like Syracuse, going to basketball games is generally very exciting. And the way I get tickets for games is by using Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite feature is the curated deals. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, theater, etc. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. In a nutshell, Cal's defense is the better of the two units. Cal this season has given up less than 330 total yards per game. That is second best in the ACC. Cal is also the number one scoring defense in the ACC. They allow less than 20 points per game this season. Only twice this year have they allowed more than 30 points in the game. And only 3 times this year, they've allowed more than 20 points in a game this season. So, in summary, in 6 of the 9 games that Cal has played this year, they have held their opponent to 20 points or less. Actually, not 20 points or less than 20 points. So Cal is a team that doesn't give up a lot of yards, and they don't give up a lot of points either. They're a very good defense. Who are some of the standouts for Cal, and what makes their defense so effective? I'm going to tell you right now. I think their number one standout is an outside linebacker, 5th-year senior. He's number 44 on Cal's defense, Xavier Carlton. Xavier Carlton is 3rd in the ACC with 9 sacks this season. 9 sacks in 9 games. I would call a sack a game pretty good. Wouldn't you say so? That's pretty good. He's an edge rusher. And by the way, this is the 3rd elite edge rusher that Syracuse football is going to face in a row. Their 3rd one in a row that they're going to face. A few weeks ago, it was Virginia Tech with Antoine Powell-Ryland. Boston College last week with David Azaraku. What does this mean for Syracuse football? Well, I really lit into the offensive line last week. I thought it was really a bad performance by them. Really bad. And they're going up against one of the elite edge rushers in the country once again this week. I haven't seen a depth chart for Syracuse released for it. I don't know who's going to play left tackle, whether it's going to be Weatherspoon or Wollaba. But the bottom line for Syracuse is that those tackles, they're going to have to be ready, especially their left tackle in protecting Kyle McCord's blind side. They better be ready. And I think the strategy for going up against a guy like Xavier Carlton is limit the amount of one-on-ones he gets against our tackles. You really got to limit them. I think the best course of action is really, there's 2 ways you can attack it, aside from leaving him one-on-one, which is not really an option. I think you can chip with a tight end. If you chip with the tight end, that slows the pass rush by even just a half second. So it gives your offensive line a little bit more of an edge there. You can chip with one of your tight ends. The other option, and this is something I think Syracuse needs to do more often, is not a lot of empty sets. You need to put a running back in the backfield next to Kyle McCord, preferably on the side of Xavier Carlton. Because if you put a running back there, then let's say one of the tackles does get beat, and chances are at times in this game they will against Carlton. At least you have your running back there who's not going to be able to block him fully, but he's going to be able to slow him down enough so that Kyle McCord can at least step up in the pocket or roll out so he doesn't have to worry about getting his head knocked off by Xavier Carlton. So that's what they got to do with him. They got to either chip with the tight end or use a running back in the backfield to help. So that's Xavier Carlton. But they're also good in the secondary, led by Nohl Williams, a cornerback, fifth-year senior, number 3. Williams is one of the premier corners in the ACC, if not the country, and he is quickly rising up the NFL draft boards. He leads the nation with 7 interceptions this season. 7 interceptions in 9 games. I know that interceptions are not everything for a defensive back because as much as an interception is a game-changing play. But at the same time, sometimes corners take more chances than others. So if you're aggressive, think of like a guy like on the Cowboys, Trevon Diggs, right? He can have a year where he has 11 interceptions, but the very next play, he lets up a 90-yard touchdown. It's a boomer bust type of corner. So interceptions aren't everything, but when you have a guy that has picked off 7 passes in 9 games, I would call that elite. In Nohl Williams, he's got NFL size. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, and he's pretty fast too. And if I'm Syracuse, the strategy really is I would limit the amount of times you're throwing to his side of the field. I really would. Syracuse does have talented receivers. Can they get open one-on-one against a guy like Nohl Williams? Most likely, it wouldn't happen often. It can happen, but not often. He's a type of corner that can completely shut down one side of the field. What does that mean for Syracuse? Don't target him often because oftentimes he's going to pick it off. And that's not fun. They also have a pair of inside linebackers that makes their defense very effective. Let's start off with someone who's, I think, going to play in this game. Like, I don't see any injury front on him because the next guy we're going to talk about actually does have an injury heading into this one. But the first one is Teddy Buchanan, a fifth-year senior. He's number 10. He leads Cal with 83 tackles and also leads the team with 9 tackles for loss. He's a very good inside linebacker. Teddy Buchanan, keep your eye on him. And the next one, he's iffy on whether he's going to play or not because he's got a leg injury. I believe he left the last game against Wake Forest early in that one. But it's Cade Uluave. Cade Uluave is a sophomore, number 0. Uluave last season was the Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. He's second on the team in tackles with 67. So if he's active, that means that Cal has 2 very, very good inside linebackers, and that would make their linebacking trio elite. 2 very good inside linebackers on top of the fact that you got Xavier Carlton screaming off the edge. That doesn't bode well for Syracuse. And they also have a shutdown corner in a guy like Nohl Williams. So once again, that is Cal's defense. And I mentioned 4 guys that stand out on their defense, one of which in Cade Uluave, who might not play this week because he's got a leg injury. I read an article that said he's questionable for the game. I think their head coach said earlier that he is day-to-day. Day-to-day is take it for what it's worth. It's day by day. You got to see how it goes. So we'll see if Cade Uluave plays or not. But regardless, whether he plays or not, Cal has an elite defense. This is one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the ACC. And it's honestly probably the best defense that Syracuse is going to face this season. And I know we're late in the year, but Cal's probably the best. Whether they play the best is a whole nother thing. I mean, when Syracuse headed into that game against Pitt, Pitt was not a team that was known for having a great defense this season, but we saw how that turned out. They ended up playing the best game of their lives. We'll see how Cal plays, but overall, they have a very, very good defense, and Syracuse is going to have to protect the football against this Cal defense because Nohl Williams, he can pick you off. They got some guys who can stream off that edge. They got some good linebackers. It's going to be tough for this Syracuse offense. So we've gone over a team overview of Cal. We've talked about Cal's offense. We've talked about Cal's defense. Coming up, I'm going to give you guys my official prediction for Syracuse versus Cal. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And Syracuse football is now an 8.5-point underdog at Cal on Saturday with a money line at plus 235. You think Syracuse can cover, or better yet, pull off the upset? I mean, we just went over Cal's offense and Cal's defense. Really, is Syracuse football going to be able to move the ball against this Cal's defense? That's up for you to decide. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's predict how Syracuse and Cal is going to go on Saturday. Let's do it, okay? First of all, I want to say this. I mean, I really hope that Fran Brown is going to be able to shower with soap this week. And if you guys don't know what I'm referring to, well, it's his press conference on Monday when he essentially said that he does not shower after Syracuse football loses games. So hopefully Fran Brown can take a shower this week. It would be very nice because that means that Syracuse football wins. That being said, I just read it in the promo that Syracuse football is a pretty big underdog in this one. FanDuel has them as an 8.5-point road underdog at the Cal Golden Bears this Saturday at 3 o'clock. 8.5 points. In my opinion, I think that Cal deserves to be favored. First of all, they're at home. Syracuse is traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast. Cal's a good team. 8.5 seems like a little much. I mean, I know that they're usually right, but 8.5. I mean, that would mean on a neutral site that Cal would be a 5.5-point favorite, and it would mean that if Syracuse actually hosted Cal this week, they'd be a field goal underdog still. But Cal does deserve to be favored. I think the line is just a little bit off. I'd probably put it at 5.5, but that's neither here nor there. I think this game is going to come down to how much you trust Syracuse's defense. I really do. Because I talked about how vaunted the Cal defense can be, but aside from the Pitt game for Syracuse, they've been able to score a respectable amount of points against everyone else. Aside from the Pitt game was a total disaster for Syracuse. Total disaster. But every other opponent they have faced this season, they have put up a respectable total at minimum on offense. We have seen the ceiling of this offense. We've also seen the floor of this offense, but for the most part, they will put up a respectable total on pretty much anyone. A respectable means at least 20. At least 20 against everyone. This isn't necessarily the game that I think Syracuse is going to put up 30 plus. I really don't see that happening. So it's going to come down to whether or not you trust this Syracuse football defense. I also think that this matchup is weird because Syracuse is a team that does not generate a lot of pressure, which doesn't bode well for them because Cal's offensive line, as I mentioned at the top, is very, very weak. That might be the weakest part of their team, is their offensive line. Syracuse football doesn't generate a lot of pressure. So is that something they can really take advantage of? However, Syracuse football also can't stop the run for a lick. They can't. But Cal all season hasn't been able to run the football. So it's the team's strengths and weaknesses. It's not like you can say, oh, Cal has a weakness on their offensive line and Syracuse does a really good job of generating pressure. That could be a mismatch there. And it also goes with Syracuse's run defense. Our run defense isn't very good, but Cal's rush offense isn't very good. It's like weakness versus weakness, weakness versus weakness. But overall, it's not like I trust this defense all that much. I do think Syracuse is going to cover in this one, but I don't think they're going to win. I'm going to pick against Syracuse for the second time on this podcast. I picked against them against Virginia Tech. It actually went quite well. But I have to be honest. I'm going to pick Cal in this one to win on a last-second field goal to break our hearts, 27-24. Leave a comment in the comment section below your thoughts on this game and your score prediction. Do you think that Syracuse football is going to pull off the road upset this Saturday against Cal? I would love to hear your thoughts. And please, if you're a Syracuse fan, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why Syracuse is going to win, because I would love to hear your reasoning behind that. Hopefully, they can get a bounce-back victory. It's not a game I would say is impossible for Syracuse to win. Like, I had this game being very close. They could pull off the upset here, but I'm going to pick the team that is favored in Cal to win at home 27-24. As far as what is coming up on the podcast in the future, tomorrow, we got Poll Friday on a Thursday. That's right. We've done Poll Friday on a Saturday before, but I don't know if we've ever done a Poll Friday on a Thursday. What is your new record prediction for Syracuse football? They're 6-3 right now. They have a downside of 6-6 and an upside of 9-3. So where do you think Syracuse falls between those two extremes? Or do you think they are one of those extremes? I really don't think they're going to be 6-6 because if you look at their schedule, Syracuse does have a circle win left on it, which I'll talk about on tomorrow's mini podcast, Poll Friday on a Thursday, new record prediction for Syracuse football. The reason why I decided that this week I'm going to move up Poll Friday to Thursday is because on Friday we got a full podcast for you all. That's right. Normally I don't do full podcasts on Fridays, but this week is special. It is. It's going to be Syracuse basketball related. No, it's not previewing the game against Youngstown State. Oh, no, my friends. That's not what we're doing on Friday. Kyan Anthony. He is making his college decision Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on his dad's podcast called 7 p.m. in Brooklyn. You can find that one on YouTube. I'll do a full reaction podcast to Kyan Anthony's decision, good or bad. A lot of analysts out there, recruiting analysts, are saying Syracuse is the heavy favorite. But that being said, we don't know officially until Friday night. He's choosing between Syracuse, USC, and technically in his final three, Auburn is there as well. But I think his dad actually spoiled it. His dad, of course, is Carmelo Anthony. He spoiled it like last week that it's really between Syracuse and USC. So which school is Kyan Anthony going to choose? Well, regardless, I'm going to react to it in a full podcast on Friday night right after he makes his decision. So that's on Friday for you all. On Saturday, oh boy, this is going to be a busy weekend here on Locked On Syracuse. And that means you're going to want to hit this like button on the video. You're also going to want to subscribe to the channel so you know right away when I'm dropping all these podcasts, right? You're going to want to hit that subscribe button because on Saturday, we got 2 post-game reaction shows on the same day. Thank you, schedule makers. Syracuse basketball hosts Youngstown State at 1 p.m. Eastern. The game was originally at 2, but they decided to move the game back 1 hour because of the football game against Cal. However, if I'm being nitpicky here, they really should have moved the game to noon. So that way you have a noon basketball game. The game probably ends around 2 o'clock. And then the football game's at 3 o'clock. They probably should have done that, but nope. They decided to do 1 o'clock instead for the basketball game, which is better than, I guess, than 2. But still, we'll have a post-game reaction to that. And then later on in the day, Syracuse football travels to Cal, which is the matchup we've been previewing this entire podcast. At 3 p.m. Eastern, there will be a full post-game reaction podcast to that one. All right? So, having said that, thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenta Gibbs, they keep it real, and they bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping all those podcasts because, folks, we got a lot of podcasts coming in the next few days. I mentioned all of them, right? We got Poll Friday on Thursday. We got Kyan Anthony Decision Podcast on Friday. We got 2 post-game reaction shows on Saturday. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. And everyone, take care.